People are joining. Make yourself comfortable. Have a seat. Join the circle. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue. Jashig. Many of us are here on traditional, unceded Algonquin Anishinaabeg territory, and many of you are on several territories across the country for day 3 of Career Bootcamp 2026, where you will explore how to turn challenges into stepping stones for growth personally and professionally. So first off, this session is offered in English and French simultaneously. Afin de visionner la session en français, veuillez retourner au lobby et cliquer sur le lien pour la session française. Okay, people are joining. That's fantastic. Did you know that Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the Government of Canada? And its only goal is to support you, yes, you, on your career journey. I am just reflecting on a fabulous journey that I've had. And you know what? You can have that journey as well. Questions from the audience. I just want to touch upon that, everyone. So as we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. And you can also vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up portion of your thumbs up button. So if you're wondering who I am Gina Wilson. I am the moderator for today's session. And I just wanted to give you a few housekeeping items before we get started. As with all Federal Youth Network sessions, this one too will be recorded, so you can go back, check it out, look at the recordings, maybe something you've thought of later. You go back and get some insights at a later date. Also, the recordings on the FYN YouTube channel, I believe it's the FYN YouTube channel, we are also offering another way to learn this year. So there is a podcast series of the Career Bootcamp sessions. Yay, podcasts. The podcasts will be made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Another point I wanted to mention is that the PowerPoint presentations for each session are included on the wiki page so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. Another reminder, and just to check in with you in terms of how you're feeling, but some of the discussion topics, some of the vocabulary at times, and the scenarios, some people may find that distressing. So if you need to take a break, go ahead and do so. If you need support, you can certainly reach out to your organization's employee assistance program, which is available 24/7. So enough housekeeping, time to get things underway. This is going to be fun. So I have a couple of quick polling questions. This is not a test and not mandatory, but if you can roll with me here, I would sure appreciate it. Okay, so let me take a look. Oh, there it is. All right. So how familiar are you with the concept of psychological safety in the workplace? Are you very familiar, somewhat familiar? I've heard of it, but don't know very much about it, or I just never heard about it at all, so not familiar at all. So cast your votes while I let you know what, oh, there it is. So most of you are somewhat familiar. Some of you have heard about it, but don't know a lot. That's great. And very few of you are very familiar. So this is a good session to be in. I'm going to just read the objectives for today. Should be displayed on the screen. Maybe not. Well, if they're not, you know what? The objectives, it'll come to pass that you will understand the objectives, and I believe that they are in the deck that Gavin will start with. But first, before I go there, I want to introduce our panelists that we are really fortunate to have with us today. An awesome panel. Let me start with Richard Sharp, who I'll ask to turn his camera on. Richard, wonderful to see you again. I hope you're keeping well. And if you're in Toronto, I should have asked, I hope you've dug out of the snow. Um, wow, I knew Richard when he was with the feds, and now he's with the Ontario government. He's quite the advocate, and he's been doing great work for Black equity, anti-Black racism, and with and for people of African descent. Gajashig, welcome, Richard. Oh, turn your mic on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here again. Nice to see you again, Gina. Looking forward to the conversation ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Then we have Susan Badame, also working in Ontario and leading this region with the national managers community. She is doing all kinds of work, but essentially bringing people together, building, creating, collaborating, and dedicated to helping managers manage a super important community. Susan.
Thank you so much, Gina. I just want to say thank you so much to the Federal Youth Network for inviting me to participate on this dynamic panel today. I'm excited to have this opportunity. As you mentioned, I normally work with the national managers community in my role, and I host a lot of events. I often host the panel, and I don't get to sit on it. So I'm really thankful to have the opportunity today.
Thanks for being here. Finally, I see we have Gavin Cadotte here with us. So Gavin is an assistant deputy minister and is currently leading the Public Service Renewal Secretariat at PCO, a very key role to influence change and improve systems. She was at the Public Service Commission and Canadian Heritage. So glad you are here, Gavin. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with my amazing Palinist colleagues. Good to see you too, Gina. And looking forward to dive in. As mentioned, I work at PCO right now, but I've traveled the public service over the past 27 years. I started as a student, and so it's actually almost to the day. It's been 27 years. I started in January. So it's really great to be here. But, I think we can just dive right in at this point and let's go to a little bit about what psychological safety is. So a number of you in the poll mentioned that you're sort of getting introduced to the topic. You've heard it at some point and want to know a little bit more. So I'll start by grounding us in what we mean when we talk about psychological safety. Amy Edmondson, a leadership professor at Harvard Business School, who's done decades of research on leadership, team dynamics, she describes psychological safety as the belief that you can speak up, take risks, and show up as yourself without worrying about what's going to come back to bite you. So, in other words, it's about being able to ask a question, admit you don't know something, raise a concern, or acknowledge a mistake, and still feel respected and feel supported. It's that feeling that your team has your back. Even when you're not perfect, even if we make a mistake, because to be honest, it's all of us, and we all need that safety. So if I were to pick like a real life example to demonstrate what this looks like in the workplace, for example, imagine you're in a team meeting, and one of your colleagues speaks up and sort of says, I realized I misinterpreted a data point in last week's briefing, and it might change one of our recommendations. Instead of being criticized or embarrassed, the manager responds with, thanks for catching that. Let's take a minute to walk through it together. The team adjusts, the team acknowledges their honesty, and moves on. And that moment where someone felt safe enough to admit a mistake and the team handled it constructively, that is an example of psychological safety in action. And so, why does this matter to us in the public service? Well, it's proven to boost performance. Psychological safety consistently shows up as one of the number one factors to high performing teams. And when people feel safe, they share more ideas, they challenge assumptions, they collaborate more, and that all leads to better solutions, leads to solutions faster. It increases engagement as well. When you know that your voice matters and your perspective is welcomed, and you're naturally more connected to the work and to the team around you. It really helps to create a sense of belonging. And psychological safety reduces burnout. When you don't feel like you have to hide your mistakes or constantly overmanage how you show up, the stress drops. You can focus on doing the work rather than managing fear. And lastly, it improves retention. People tend to stay where they feel respected and supported. So, if we're going to look now to the behaviors that support or undermine psychological safety, so I want you to think about something for a moment. Have you ever felt unsafe to speak up? Maybe it was in a meeting, maybe it was with a manager, maybe even in a group chat. What was it about that moment that made you pull back instead of leaning in? Now, that reflection is important because it helps us to understand the environment we're all trying to build and the behaviors that either support it or quietly chip away at it. And there are certain behaviors that really help create a psychological safe workplace. Things like active listening, things like admitting mistakes, being open about where things didn't go well so the team can learn from it instead of hiding it. Using inclusive language. These are all small choices in how we speak and how we make everyone feel like they're part of the conversation. And I've seen these behaviors play out in simple but powerful ways. For example, a colleague once paused at a fast-moving meeting to say, "Hang on, I just want to make sure that we're hearing from people who haven't spoken yet." This impacts the work most. Um, Another time might be when someone sort of made the wrong call on the timeline, and here's what I've learned. So sharing, I made a mistake. This is what I've learned. Those moments might feel small, but they can change the tone of a workplace. And just like these behaviors that support safety, there are those that undermine them. Things like interrupting. This happens repeatedly to the same people. Or sarcasm. It might feel funny in the moment, but can land as dismissive or belittling. And there's like straight up dismissiveness, like brushing off someone's idea quickly, like, oh, that won't work, without even exploring it. And so here's the thing about those subtle behaviors matter. The raised eyebrow, the sigh, the quick eye roll, or someone checking their phone in the minute when someone else starts talking. Those little cues can have a surprisingly big impact on whether people choose to speak up or stay quiet. So that brings us to the question of trust. Trust doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly through consistency, empathy, and real openness. People start to trust you when your actions match your words, when you show genuinely that you understand their perspective, and when you share honestly instead of behind formality. And there's a few practical things that teams can do that build that kind of trust. One is having regular check-ins and not just sort of the status update kind, but like the real conversations about how people are doing and what they need. Another is setting clear expectations. So no one's guessing what success looks like. Another is offering constructive feedback and the kind of feedback that helps people grow instead of tearing them down. These are all powerful trust builders. And so there's strategies that we can use as individuals, being curious instead of judgmental in our tone. It's the difference between saying, "Why did you do that?" and "Help me understand what you're thinking." Using inclusive language signals like that help people see that you see them and that you value them, and following through on your commitments even though it seems small, it tells colleagues that they can rely on you. Again, all steps for building trust. And so this is, no matter what your role or your level, everyone can contribute to the psychological safe workplace. And so, these are things that we can start to have different examples of when my panelists come to chat after. But, we've looked at that question of trust. What's our role in safety? So one thing is that really to emphasize is that it's not just a leadership responsibility. I mean, as leaders, we have a huge responsibility for setting the tone, but this is something that everyone needs to engage in. This culture is built through daily interactions, and everyone contributes to those. There are some simple things we can do right away. Authentic check-ins, as I mentioned, with colleagues, supporting people when they take risks, especially when they're putting forth a new idea or maybe admitting that something didn't go as planned. You can respect boundaries, both your own and other people's, whether that's about workload or communication style or time. Another powerful tool is asking, tell me more. It invites people to open up instead of shutting down. And taking a moment to reflect on your impact. Like, how did your tone land? What was the body language that showed up? And can we prevent small misunderstandings from turning into bigger issues? And so again, it's those sort of those small behaviors that we can kind of do that really have that ripple effect on how to make a whole team feel safer. So to wrap up this part, I thought we could reflect on one thing. What's one small action you can take today, just one, to make your team a little more psychologically safe? As you think about that, you'll hear from panelists, my colleagues today about what some of that could look like. But let's first dive into a case study and see. I'm going to present the scenario. It's a coworker raises a concern in a meeting. The team leader dismisses it. No one else speaks up. Imagine yourself in this meeting and consider, what messages does this send to the team? How might this affect future conversations? Now, let's go to the polling question. If you were in this meeting, how likely would you be to speak up after seeing that response? And then secondly, how do you think the team lead's response affects the team's psychological safety? So the poll questions are up now. I invite everyone to click your response. I don't think I can see the live responses. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I can see them now. Just had to switch windows. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We can see, being able to speak up in those moments, it even challenges our own safety to do that, right? And so that one comment already shifts the balance. And then we see that that not only has an impact in the meeting itself, but in how it can undermine even future interactions. So thanks for going with me on that journey through sort of getting us all on the same page, some shared understanding of psychological safety and thinking through sort of that live case. And so with that, I'll turn it back to our moderator, Gina, to start the panel discussion. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Gavin. You really had me thinking. When you have those kinds of interactions in a meeting, very simple interactions, sometimes some folks call those microaggressions as well, when you just go, that's never going to work. No thanks, or just ignore, or those kind of cues. I know in my culture, I was in a session one time with an elder who was doing some teachings, and he was asked, what is the most important teaching? And he said, believe it or not, he said kindness. Kindness is the most important teaching. So when you're looking, you want to be in a meeting, you want to experience some degree of kindness. And in the public service, we also call it respect. So, okay, let's go. So we are going to have some Q&As now. So please, panelists, answer the questions as quickly as possible so we can cover more material. I'll ask the question and one panelist will answer. The others can add or discuss as long as we keep it moving. So And again, any resources mentioned will be shared on the wiki page after the event. So I'm going to start off with Richard. So we've had some presentation now on psychological safety, and we know it's fundamental for inclusion, innovation, and excellence in the workplace. Richard, how can we build this into the fabric of our public service culture so that we can be bolder and move faster in our service delivery to Canadians?
Thank you, Gina. I think this is a really critical question with respects to psychological safety. We have to make sure that we build this into the culture, and I think this starts at the leadership level. I think that leaders define the best and the worst behavior within your organization. And if your leaders are open and to the ideas and the perceptions and perspectives of folks that work with them, it creates that trust that Gavin was talking about amongst the team, and that sense that I can make the contributions that I need to make. The other thing that I would say is that you just alluded to it, and I'll be really brief on this, is that psychological safety for diverse populations is a bit it's a bit different. We talk about inclusion, but inclusion sometimes is a slippery slope. It is important for us to be authentic at work. We should not have to hide our identities or assimilate into a culture in order to manage, in order to be. So if you're Black or you're brown or you're Asian, a person with disabilities, or a person with a different sexual identity or orientation, you should be able to know that you're in an organization that receives you for who you are so that you can actually thrive. This should be baked into how we think about leadership, how we think about creating space for people. Organizations that do this succeed. Studies have said this over and over again. So I think that we're in a good place to have this conversation, especially during this time where people are being cut, people are afraid, and the people who are the most vulnerable during this time in terms of their jobs and their well-being are oftentimes racialized, Black and racialized employees within this institution. So it's important that we create a place of psychological safety as leaders so people can at least talk about what's happening and we can give them a place to feel received and that their ideas and perspectives are being supported and respected.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Gavin or Susan, did you want to jump in on this one? Just jump in if you do. Well, we could go to the next question because I'm going to ask Susan to answer it. So let me turn to you, Susan. Can you share a time when psychological safety made a difference in a project or team dynamic?
For sure. Thanks, Gina. I was the acting manager in a department before I came to the national managers community. And I had a situation where I had received a complaint from an internal partner from another team regarding the behavior of one of my staff. And I had to jump in and deal with that. And I think that psychological safety and the way in which I had the conversation with the employee greatly helped to to resolve the situation. And I'm a certified ICF coach, and I feel as though I employed a lot of my coaching techniques with respect to having the conversation with my employee. And I started the conversation by providing him with the opportunity to explain the situation from his perspective. And I didn't place any judgment on the situation or the fact that we had received a complaint. I employed active listening, and I gave the employee the opportunity to explain his side of the interaction and to kind of delve into the situation. I asked him a lot of coaching questions, a lot of open-ended questions about what happened. Like, can you tell me some more? What do you think the impact of this interaction will have on you and on the team moving forward? And I allowed him the opportunity to set some boundaries because he was feeling a little uncomfortable about the situation and unsure how to move forward. And of course, as the manager, I wanted to resolve the problem as quickly as possible. But we had about 3 or 4 conversations on the topic, and I allowed him that opportunity to think through it, to think through what he wanted to do, how he wanted to resolve the issue, what the next steps might be. And after a few conversations, he was able to have a conversation with the person who made the complaint. And in the end, it was all just some, I think, mixed communication lines, and the situation was resolved. So, I think it's also important to not judge your staff or judge others for situations where perhaps someone has been offended. And in fact, just, talk it through and provide the opportunity for people to comment on where they're coming from and think about what a good resolve, what the next steps might be.
That's great. Richard talked about creating space, and that's what you did, Susan, is you created space to have that respectful, honest dialogue, which ultimately built some trust. And so the person, that whole situation you were able to move that forward. Gavin, before we turn to the audience, because some questions are coming in, psychological safety, as you know, needs to involve everyone in the workplace. Can you speak to how to build a culture of psychological safety in your organization? But I mean, your organization is public service wide, but certainly,
Yeah.
taking on probably a smaller organization. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll touch on a couple of things from my own leadership experience too. But, as we just learned, building a culture of psychological safety in an organization, it's essential for fostering, where employees feel comfortable sharing their ideas, concerns, perspectives without fear of punishment or fear of embarrassment. And so everyone has a role to play. And organizations who foster open communication, organizations that actually put in concrete measures and are very visible to demonstrate that equity and diversity are valued, including diverse perspectives and anti-racism measures. These are things that organizations need to put in place to sort of demonstrate and lay foundational pieces for psychological safety. And they need to also be organizations where you're encouraging that open and respectful communication, where every employee feels heard. So creating those mechanisms where people can voice, things that they feel could be changed or ideas, like these are things that can be done centrally or even within teams. It could be a team meeting where you're like, this is our ideas meeting, everything's on the table. This is our, barrier buster meeting. Like, tell me where it's not going well or where we can, simplify where things aren't working, or it could be at the organizational level, sort of the Ask Me Anything DM meeting or the, whatever it may be. You can create and structure these things so that's not so ad hoc. The other one is around acknowledging and recognizing employees for their efforts, even when the outcomes aren't successful. So, like the way we treat mistakes or failures or derailments really communicate strongly the level of safety, psychological safety in an organization. So, this can either lead to an environment of trust where people feel that they can take more calculated risks, or inversely, a place where people are a little bit more risk averse. One of the best teams that I worked in was early in my career. Well, I've been worked on great teams all over the place, but this one just for this example, I love it. Is because I used to say to I used to characterize it this way, and I would talk to my friends. I'm like, I work in a place where no one cares if they get the credit, but people generously gave out credit to where credit was due. So you never had to feel like you had to pump your own horn or like, oh, no one noticed. you didn't care because everyone was all about the results or all about working together. It just felt good, but it also felt good because everyone kept sharing, the credit or sharing praise or recognition. And it was just a beautiful thing. And that's a culture where there was extreme trust, extreme safety. For me as a leader, when I have an onboarding session or a welcome meeting with a new staff member or new staff, if it's in a group, I explicitly say in that meeting that you don't need to learn how to fit in here. We've hired you. We want you in our organization. You already belong just as you are. And I've been told that this is the first time that many employees have ever heard that told to them joining a new organization. You don't have to figure us out. Just be you. It's a powerful message. So, as employees and as leaders, as Richard said, particularly leaders, we have to model those respectful behaviors. We have to be deliberate around providing constructive feedback, to actively listening, encouraging and respecting boundaries, and being transparent. For me as a leader, I again, I'm upfront usually when I join a new organization and, along the way as well, I'm very upfront around my expectations around respect and civility in the workplace. It's part of my welcome meeting. Hello, I'm Gavin. I've just joined your organization. As a leader, shortly within, after the bio, I don't tolerate, you know, lack of respect, uncivil behavior. And if it arises, I'm going to be dealing with it immediately. And I share that if I'm the perpetrator, because I'm only human too, I will apologize and work to reconcile. And I really do feel that if you're a leader, or actually anyone in an organization, really, but particularly as leaders, if you look back in your year and you haven't had to say, I'm sorry to one person in your workplace, you probably missed an opportunity to repair and strengthen a relationship or to reconcile. There's an colleague or an employee who trusts you just a little less because of it. So, it requires that humility. Trust is key in a workplace. Trust can only be built in a psychologically safe workplace. And so leaders should have this as, regular engagement with employees, whether it's through the pulse checks, surveys, town halls. There's so many different ways to purposefully engage in this way. And as you mentioned, Gina, like in my role in public service renewal, this is an area of focus for the clerk and for all of us. It's in the corporate priorities for deputy heads to build a values-based organization that is inclusive. So maybe I'll wrap there. Thanks.
Awesome. I remember one supervisor I worked for that came in and said, "I'm all about respect." That was it, just respect. And I was just blown away that he came in and said that, and he actually walked the talk when it came to it. So it did make a great difference. And I bet that great team you worked on, you probably laughed a lot as
We
well,
did.
right?
We sure did.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to questions from the audience on which you may use the Q&A function. Just remember that you can vote for the questions you like by using the thumbs up. I'm going to start with one question, and I'm going to ask any of you just to jump in, and maybe we can go back to the Richard, Susan, Gavin order. What are some of the signs that psychological safety might be lacking in a team? Some flags.
Yeah, that's good. And I think people recognize some of these things. So you're in a meeting and you ask a question and nobody answers. It's like you hear the crickets. You can hear a pin drop. Something's going on. Sometimes you go to meetings where you usually see people on screen and nobody has their camera on. Nobody feels like turning on the camera on. And I'm not saying that you need to turn your camera on, but for me, in some of the spaces that I'm working in, that sometimes where we're dealing with difficult situations and issues, that's our way to make some small form of connection is through cameras, through seeing people. So not saying you have to do it, but I'm saying that sometimes that's where it shows up. You also see it in terms of people silencing themselves, not just in meetings, but sometimes in correspondence. They will not respond, or they will wait and wait and wait for approval before they even speak. They don't feel safe to be able to step out and provide input and provide their contributions. So again, I always say that it's really about leadership. I tell stories about the things sometimes that I'm afraid of or that I'm concerned about or allow myself to be vulnerable in some of these spaces, so that folks see that I'm human, and that it's important for them to also know that their humanness and their sense of who they are is being respected and heard in these spaces. It goes a long way over a period of time. It doesn't just happen overnight. I can say that I trust people and I respect people, but when somebody does something wrong, something egregious to folks, I'm not big on apologies, really. I think that people show their commitment to respect and how they're sorry by how they continue to behave. And if they behave in a way that demonstrates that they learned from whatever mistake and wrong that they've done, and that they're willing to move forward and build not just a working relationship, but a relationship built on trust and respect. And that goes much further for me than any apology could. And when that happens, oftentimes that's where you see magic happens. That's when you see people say, okay, this is a good place to work. People have the capacity to change. They have the capacity to recognize when they've done something wrong, and it translates through their behavior in terms of how they've adjusted themselves and role within the workplace, so that people don't feel that sense of fear and trepidation. We want people to, again, to my earlier comments, we want people to thrive. We don't want people just to survive their workplaces.
So action matters in this space. Yeah. Gavin or Susan?
Yeah, it's so true. And like I remember a key red flag is when, your idea generators, your sort of like, first to speak, when they start to go quiet, then you're in like the red zone. And I recall a time where I was working in an organization, I was a manager, and I was spending a lot of time like this, making sure that my team could did not feel and experience what I was going through and other my colleagues were going through when an acting manager was put in place to sort of lead for a short period of time. And my boss, who was on French language training, came back just to check on things, and she said, "How's things going?" I said, "Oh, they're fine. I'm just keeping my head down, plugging through." And she went, "Uh-oh. Gavin's keeping her head down.
Mhm.
Gavine's keeping her head down and staying silent. I need to make some changes, right?" And, to her credit, she didn't sort of say, well, let's just see how things work out. Da, da, da. She was immediately looking at a leadership switch while she was away, which was the best thing. So I think back on those moments and, as a leader myself now thinking, you have to sort of recognize those things. So that question about red flags, it's like, it's the silence. It's the ideas starting to quiet down. It's sort of the retreating back, people shrinking in, both visibly and just, in their behaviors. And that's when you really, as leaders, need to act or highlight. So, I mean, you've got to be paying attention to those types of flags for sure.
Mm. Okay, Susan.
I think I would say the water cooler chat. The water cooler chat can tell you a lot about what's happening in your organization. I
Mm.
think as a leader, if you notice that people are chatting until you walk into the room and then there's no more chat, Richard's laughing, then you might have a problem there, to look into. And even if you're not the leader, if you're on a team and you're not being, included in the conversation, then perhaps you need to do some digging into, what the situation is and how to engage with your team members more. Also, one other thing that came to mind was when you were speaking, Gavin, was
Mm.
absenteeism.
Mm.
People, sometimes they
Yep.
just don't want to be there. They
Yep.
they don't want to be part of something that doesn't make them feel safe and secure, and so absenteeism may go up.
Mm. That's excellent. I'm going to kind of combine the next couple of questions because, I think there's some folks here in the room that are struggling a bit when it comes to
Mm.
safety in their teams. So I want us to take the time to really help as much as we could. So, one question that's come forward are there any tips for building trust with your supervisor? For example, if they tell you that the workplace is a safe space, but they don't model that when it comes to safety, how do we trust them? So that they're not walking the talk. They're just saying it, but they're behaving differently. And then the other question is, I feel my manager is focusing on my team's mistakes rather than our good work. And this is very stressful. What can I do? So we have a few managers out there who may not be creating that safety, and we have some employees who are yearning for that safety. What kind of advice can you give some of those employees?
Wow.
Go ahead, Gavin. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough
So if I could be really honest, because I guess I have to be, because that's the whole point, is if your manager is not walking the talk and not creating psychological safety, like they say it's safe, but they're not showing you it's safe, it's not safe. So you have to behave accordingly. I'm sorry, but it's the sad truth. So what does that mean, right? How do you then create that sense of safety and how do you model? I think in those circumstances, I'm trying to think of something, trying to think of a situation where I was kind of feeling that way a little bit. And to me, it was about finding that safety with colleagues, right? And finding a place where we together could find our own spots to sort of have discussions, move work forward, talk through issues and problems, have not to create a united front, but know that we had each other's backs. And so you just felt a little bit more safe. So that was one thing that really an approach that really helped me. And the other thing was to really understand, in my case, if I was thinking of the example that happened, like where I felt like psychologically unsafe, it did change over time. So there, but for me, I was trying to figure out what was causing this dynamic and relationship. Like it could I like you can't always diagnose these things, but I was in that curiosity mode. And I realized that the person I was working for was really uncomfortable. They had just become a manager and they were very uncomfortable in this role. Like they were, and I was feeling it, right? Everything was double checked, the micromanagement, the why, the what, it was just a lot. And eventually I was like, I need to figure out a way how to give this person information so that they're starting to feel like they have what they need. So I was like over reporting and putting things in writing, like here's what we did this week, here's how we move this forward, da 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 da, and just having sort of like the information and how do you want this in writing, verbally, here's the status update, here's that update. So these were things that I was kind of putting in place, but what really helped to build that sort of sense of safety again for me, it was doing that with and amongst my colleagues who were all managers reporting to this person and building that amongst ourselves. If someone's not modeling, so the other part of that question was around, remind me, Gina, um, a
So it's
manager,
a
yeah,
manager that talks about mistakes all the time
talks
and
about
not.
mistakes all the time. Um, I, in those situations, or in that particular situation, I can't recall being in one like that myself, but I'm sure after 27 years, I'm sure it happened. I just can't recall it right off the top. But I would say, and I'd be to hear what Susan and Richard have to say about this too, but I'd be one to start to sort of say, yes, that's exactly where things went wrong, and this is what we've learned. Or let's take that back. And I would be wanting to feed that back and sort of a learned language back to the manager and echo that. Yeah, that's definitely where we went wrong, and this is what we've learned, and this is what's changed. And on top of that, here's five things that we can be proud of, right? And sometimes, even putting that back and say, just follow up to that meeting, saying, we did talk about these areas where we went wrong, and this is what we've learned from it. Our team's going to take that offline. We're going to do XYZ with that information. I thought you should also know about a couple of areas where we're having, where we're really feeling proud about it. Come join us for cake. No, I mean, We're celebrating on our own our team successes, and you're welcome to join us. So there's ways I think to sort of demonstrate back and modeling it yourself, right? Back out and say, we're going to be celebrating these successes. It'd be great if you could join us. We're just going to have, some Timbits at lunchtime. Join us, and we really want to celebrate a couple wins here. So to me, it's about sort of modeling what I can in my role in my workplace, as a way of sort of communicating out, right? So I don't know. Maybe that's a bit blah, but that's what I would do.
I like it.
That's
I
just
like it.
Gavin. I'll try it.
I like it.
Susan, what would you do?
Susan, what would you do?
I liked it. I liked it. And I would say I would probably do something similar where I might ask my colleagues, the other members on my team, like, hey, what if you give me your top 3 successes on Friday morning and I compile them, and as a team we send them off to our manager.
Yeah.
And maybe after receiving that, for a month, 4 times every Friday afternoon, then you're probably sending a bit of a message like, hey,
Yeah.
we want you to know we're doing great in these things. And
Yeah.
perhaps that will instill some thinking on the manager's
Some
part.
reflection. Yeah.
Thankful Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah, I guess this is where the gloves come off, eh? Because I think that when you're an employer in a situation where management is not walking the talk and giving you that sense of value, that you're being respected, that you have some psychological safety, sometimes you really have to read the room. I don't know if anybody has seen that film by Jordan Peele, filmed Get Out,
He's
but I could not watch that film because it reminded me too much of work, how work can be sometimes.
you gotta
When
get
you're
out.
in a situation where the leadership that you're working with has issues either with you or personal issues, and put you as an employee in a situation where you are unsafe professionally, psychologically, heaven forbid, physically, you need to get the hell out of Dodge. That's my first thing. And that not necessarily doesn't necessarily mean leaving government altogether, but finding a safe place to be. I totally agree
Mm-hmm.
with Gavin when she says about finding your community within the public service, and you could be of an ethno-racial group. You find your community because you can find a place of voice and support there. I I was part of a group that created the Federal Black Employee Caucus because the federal public service was not dealing with the issues of Black employees. We had to do it ourselves. But at the same time, as employees, we do not. There's a profound. Well, you guys are employees. I'm an executive now. I can speak, and I'm coming close to 30 years, so I'm almost done. I'm chasing Gina out the door. But what I would say is that power imbalance between manager and employee, if you are not getting what you need, you do not feel safe, and you don't feel that all of the suggestions that what Gavin and Susan has said in terms of how to cope, then you need to think about where you can go to be safe. You cannot manage the insecurities of your leadership when it comes
No.
to your own work. You can't manage the fact that if someone just doesn't like you, they don't like you. Find some place where they like you, find some place where they value you, and you move. Federal Public Service is a massive employer, and I realize that movement right now is there's risk for everybody. People are feeling fairly insecure, but you got to think about, when it's not working, what is the right thing to do for you? As much as it might seem like the end of the world to leave a job, sometimes it's the best thing that you can do for your sanity and your well-being. Psychological safety starts with you as an individual. And then from that, you can make decisions about how you roll with your teams. So I think it's important to come with that frame of reference. You are not trapped. You are not trapped in a job. If it's not working, then you need to make some changes. Last thing I'll say really quick on this, because I think it's really important. I have so many employees come to me, even though I'm gone, the employees are coming. I always say, like, document your work when it comes to the manager that's saying, it's very critical.
Yeah.
Document your work, demonstrate proof that you've done your work. Make sure you log it. So when it comes to performance management time, EPMA time, you have your own story to tell that's documented, and then have someone tell you that it's not true. Once you do that, you're covered. You're covered from all angles. But if you don't, if you go home and you pout, you sulk, you complain, but you don't have anything that documents, then you become vulnerable. Part of being psychologically safe is to make sure you have some protections around you. So, watch
Yeah.
the Jordan Peele movie so you know when it's time to leave. And then, do what you need to do to keep yourself safe in the workplace.
Richard, your message is so true. Like you can't change your manager. And I've been in situations where I had to kind of buy if I was able to. You have to know when you're unsafe. I was able to sort of bide my time and find that right like notch up. And there was times where I had just enough safety or enough safety to be able to say, hey, this is not, although that's kind of me though. I kind of tell it like it is. And say, this is not on, right? I can't operate in this type of environment or in this way of, or this approach, like not gonna happen, right? And as someone who used to run HR service delivery and, if folks were coming in disrespectful manners to my staff or my team, I was on the phone and saying, here's how it's not going to be, right?
Mhm.
So, but you can't, to your point, you have to know, like, if you're not feeling safe, if your health is being impacted, you got to take action. You got to find a way out to somewhere else. And I put, as you said, as you mentioned, as you heard, a lot of my examples mentioned putting things in writing. It's all in writing,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Well, lots of wisdom here with this panel, years of experience with a lot of experiences, and it validates everything that I would, agree with.
Mm,
I'd add something,
mm,
but I've been mentoring people and indeed talking to them about, strategy of working with your colleagues and finding safety there, finding out how the manager wants reporting to work and trying to build trust to some degree by figuring that out. Taking initiative, your own initiative as staff members for awards and recognition. And definitely, I have coached a lot of people that it's time to move on. You just
hmm
gotta, this is not going to work. You got to go now. And documenting. The only other thing I would add to all of this wisdom is employees, you need to take care of yourself as well. You need to take care of your spirit, your wellness while this is going on, because this is tough and this is stressful. So I would only add the wellness component there. We probably have time for one more question. And because we're running out of time already, if you can believe it, we do need to have a little bit of time to wrap up. And there's a few questions there. But certainly, again, it gets back to employees kind of thinking, how do I manage a situation? Like, how should I
Yeah.
respond to unprofessional or undermining comments on someone's work? How does it change in remote or hybrid setting versus in office? So that's another question. And maybe we'll just take each a minute to sort of add in any other, and let's take the opportunity to add in any other thoughts or views that we can as we answer that question. Susan, anything that you would advise if there's some kind of unprofessional or undermining comment on someone's work?
Yes, I would say I would recommend that people think about asking open-ended questions about approaching people who want to judge or be critical of others. Where are you coming from? Is there, in what way would you like to see things differently? How can we work together to produce something that is that will meet the expectations. Just, go in that exploratory mode, be curious. Hopefully, the person who's being critical is not being critical for the sake of being critical and perhaps doesn't recognize that it's offensive and will engage in conversation, and hopefully in the future you'll work better together. But again, being curious and asking open-ended questions is a great way to have a conversation that can lead to better behaviors and a better relationship moving forward.
Richard, any parting views, final thoughts to help employees manage these situations?
Yeah, I do agree with what Susan's saying in terms of how to address that. I also think it's really important to raise when something bad happens or something that happens that goes against your values or that you feel has harmed you. I see so many people who don't, that just hold it in, and that stuff can eat you up from the inside. So, you do have to speak your truth. It doesn't matter if it's hybrid or in person. When it cuts, it hurts. So you do yourself a service, a great service, by speaking to what has happened and being part of a conversation around resolution and how you would like to see it turn out, or how you would like to deal with the issue when it comes up again. People make mistakes. Like, I'm human. My children tell me every day how I've made a mistake, and I have to own up to it because I want that relationship with my kids to be attached, right? So I love my children, and so I can't just be that father guy to rain down on their parade when they're telling me that, Dad, what you did to me wasn't appropriate. I have to listen to that. I have to recognize my power dynamic within my family. It's the same at work. So if an employee comes to you as a manager and says, "Look, I didn't like that," don't get defensive. Listen, hear it out. I did, go away, think about it, come back, get advice, right? There's so many people that try to just do it by themselves. You cannot maneuver through your career in the public service through all these issues by yourself. Mentors, coaches, whatever Gina is doing her thing. I know Gavin does her thing. Susan does. I do. We talk to people, and people talk to other people. And last thing I'll say really quick, if you have an environment that's really not working and it's working for a whole bunch of people, not working for a whole bunch of people, what I found is that instead of holding it in and not talking to anybody, and then you're trying to find your escape, talk to people about it. Talk about what the issues are. Talk at the water coolers, cafeterias, at your kid's soccer game. You never know who's listening, because oftentimes, it gets back to the person who's the perpetrator. And then they have to make a decision, not necessarily to come after you because you've been talking, right? There's a lot of power in community. We're seeing it in Minneapolis right now. So in this micro version of this in your office or in your teams, community is the thing that helps to overthrow, I will say, bad management in the case of what's happened down south, or in the case of your management team at the time.
Awesome. Gavin, 30 seconds.
Geez, I don't know. Listen, I would just say, for I just scanned some of the Q&A. There's a lot of Q&A in there. There's some real questions in there that I think if you have a mentor or someone that you can trust in your organization who's got more experience in public service, maybe seen a few of these things, you need to connect with them and really get some of your questions answered. I would say that for unprofessional behaviors that happen, practice some phrases that you're comfortable with so you can in the moment not think, oh, I should have said something, oh, I should have. What are you going to say? And say, you know what, that tone, I found it a bit unprofessional. Can we just focus on something constructive, so we can move it forward? I hear what you're saying, but can you be more specific to where where can you point to where that's not clear, or that, like, really get people to explain themselves and not let that passive aggressive dismissive thing go, and really bring it back to the work, and I'm trying to get something done, as Susan said. And for some of these other questions, they're really, really good, meaty questions. I can see people really need help with individual circumstances. Reach out to your mentor, find a mentor or more senior public servant that you trust that can really help you sort of dice out how you can sort of navigate some of these situations. There we go, 30 seconds.
That's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up in 30 seconds. I did find the slide on the learning objectives, so hopefully I'm going to refer you back there to make sure that you have indeed, and we've hit the right points in terms of your learning. We've defined it. We've looked at personal actions, recognizing those behaviors. One final polling question, if I can. There was So was this session a good use of your time? Yes, no, or I don't know. And as the results are being compiled, I want to thank you for joining us today. Join us on Thursday at 1 o'clock as we kick off the final day of Career Boot Camp. On Thursday, we'll be talking about innovation, adaptability, and future-oriented thinking. And if you missed out on the opportunity, you can certainly touch base with the Federal Youth Network. Were the results there? I missed them. They went by so fast. That's okay. Oh, we don't share those. All right. Again, resources are on the wiki page. The recording of this event will be available on the YouTube channel. I want to wish you all a wonderful day. Stay warm out there because it's cold and winter, but you know we love it. So take care, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for
Thank you so
joining.
much.
Miigwech.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.